Anybody's outside? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Troop 52. Wonderful job. To begin, each mayoral candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and each board member, Board of Education candidate, will have 1 minute. Let's start with Mayor Mark Bowen. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're going to change it around. Let's start with Chris Sotero.
Thank you. Not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me? My name is Chris Sotero. I'm the Democratic candidate for mayor, and I'd first like to thank the citywide PTO for sponsoring this forum. It's certainly an opportunity for us to share ideas with the public and with each other. First, I want to say that I'm proud to have been endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers of Connecticut. Its strong schools make strong communities by providing opportunity for our children in a workforce that attracts business and economic growth. We need to build a strategic plan for our schools and prioritize the education budget to make sure our students and teachers get what they need. As mayor, I'll work with city leaders to advocate in Hartford for Danbury's fair share of education funding until we get it. I'm an attorney, and every day I advocate, I negotiate, and I work to find solutions. And that's what I'm going to do for the city of Danbury. I'm taking a problem solver's approach to Danbury's issues. I'm calling attention to the issues that have been plaguing our city for the last 18 years, because that's what a mayor is supposed to do. I want to build Danbury up. As a Democratic candidate for mayor, I hope you'll join me in seeking out newer, smarter, inclusive, and more efficient ways to create a school system that our children deserve and that taxpayers can afford. I don't want to be the longest serving mayor. I want to be the most effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Your turn, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now? Great. Good to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. We appreciate you taking the time and effort and your interest in the future of education here in Danbury. I'm proud to be on the dais with some great candidates and some folks that have served a little bit longer on the Board of Education. I'm proud to work with the elected officials that are here in this room, as well as some of those that couldn't make it here tonight, as well as the superintendent and his staff each and every day as we work and seek to improve and engage our parents as well as our children and improve our public school system. For the last 18 years, I have been mayor of the city, and I am proud of it. I'm proud of every aspect of our city. I love Danbury. And I believe it's the mayor's responsibility to be Danbury's chief cheerleader. When our kids do good, you'll see me there in every way, shape, form, and possible to be able to reward them, to thank them, and to celebrate their accomplishments and achievements. Tonight we meet in a room that was built under my administration, this auditorium, as well as expansions at Rogers Park, and we've engaged in over $100 million of expansion to all of our school buildings across our city. Those are included, but are not limited to, 3 expansions of our elementary school, a new middle school, 2 brand new elementary schools, a new hot box theater, a freshman academy, a new athletic field as well here in the city of Danbury at Danbury High School. Danbury has been rated as the most livable or the most livable cities in the state of Connecticut, and there's a reason for that. It's because of the blend of the hard work done by our school system, the blend of our low taxes, and the blend of the lowest sewer and water rates in the state.
30 seconds.
I'm proud and honored to have done the job that I've done. There's no question that we have work to do here, and I'm excited about that work. I view it as an opportunity, not as something to dump on Danbury about, but something to stand out and celebrate. We have 7 schools of distinction in our city, thanks to the great and hard work of the staff, and we ought to celebrate that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rowan, 1 minute, please.
I don't know how you can top with these 2 heavyweights here, but I'll just start by saying who I am. I'm not born in America. I was a war refugee, came in the early 80s, and I'm really, really glad to be up here and be in front of all of you. I want to make something very clear. One of the reasons why I ran for Board of Ed is for the kids. For the teachers in here, I applaud you. Thank you so much for what you've done. Because of your hard work, the graduation rate has increased amongst the minority community. And part of why I want to be a Board of Ed is I want to diversify it even a little bit more. I want the teachers and I want our school system to reflect our community, just like with our police force. It's growing in diversity, and I want the school system to reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O. Mr. Rob Pietrofesta.
Is that for me or for him? Hey, no, Ralph Pietrofesta, Republican candidate for the Board of Education, current board member for the last 6 years, former chairperson, former citywide PTO president for 3 years, citywide, Great Plain PTO for 7. One son just graduated Danbury High School, and a daughter in 10th grade. So that's a little bit about me. Just wanted to say that I am definitely committed to the children in this district, and I want to continue to do what we've been doing here in Danbury.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston.
Hi, I'm Pat Johnston. I am also a member of the Board of Ed presently. I'm the chairman for the last 2 years. I have been a resident of Danbury for quite a long time. I've spent many of the years, actually since Mayor Mark's second term was the first time I ran for office. I was on the zoning commission for 6 years. I was on the planning commission, and I've been on the Board of Education. I've tried to instill in my kids who are both attending Danbury Public Schools right now. And one of the reasons that we moved to Danbury was to attend Danbury High School. And one of the reasons why I ran for the Board of Ed was to help with what I felt was some of the issues that came about. And I've worked diligently over the last 4 years. I'm hoping to come back and continue that work. I know that we have a lot of issues going forward in the school system, and I'm certainly on board to try and do anything I can to help move it forward. So thank you so much.
Mr. Britton.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Citywide PTO for putting this on tonight. So a little bit about me. My name is Joe Britton, and I'm a proud Danbury native. I was born and raised here in Danbury. I attended Danbury Public Schools, graduating from Danbury High School not too long ago. I received my bachelor's down in the Bronx at the College of Mount St. Vincent. And for me, my family's been involved in service to Danbury for quite some time. My mom was an officer in the Shelter Rock PTO while me and my siblings were there. My grandparents owned Angelo's Pizza on South Street. And I'm currently an incumbent member of the Board of Education. I was appointed to the board back in April, serving out a vacancy, and I'm running for re-election. And really what drove me to join the board and to run for a full term in November is that I believe in Danbury Public Schools. I believe in Danbury teachers, and above all, I believe in Danbury students. I know what this district is capable of. I know what this district can produce because you're looking at a product of Danbury Public Schools. I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for the education I received here in Danbury. And, I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think we can be doing more, and I think we need a change. I think we need a plan, and, I'm honored to have your support in November. I know I will fight, and I know I will fight for our teachers and our students, and I thank you all for coming out.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the PTO for having this event tonight. My name is Gladys Cooper. I've served on the Danbury Board of Ed for 28 years. I'm currently on the board at this present time. I've been chair of the board. I've served on several committees on the board, and I've served under 5 wonderful superintendents. At the end of the day, I sit back and wonder, and I ask myself, each time that we have all these various committees, why am I doing it? I'm doing it because I love Danbury. I love our teachers and support what they bring to the table for our students. I love the diversity in our town. I like the leadership, the working together. And I think anytime that you want to move forward, you have to put things together and work together in order to move those forward. I have one son. I have 2 beautiful grandchildren. I've been a member of New Hope Baptist Church for 45 years, so that tells you I'm not a person that moves around. And I'm just here to make sure that whatever I can offer the people that are on the board to support, to make things do right or be right within our system, I'm here to do it. So I ask your support in November.
Thank you. Ms. Canada.
Thanks to the citywide PTO for putting this on, and thanks to everybody for coming this evening and supporting the community as well. I am from Bethel originally. I grew up there and graduated high school there. I spent a lot of my youth traveling in and out of Danbury because it was close, and there were a lot of things here that local communities also take advantage of. And when I grew up, I realized I wanted a little bit more diversity than what Bethel had to offer, and so I bought a house here. And I started to get involved in the community in several different ways, and ultimately found that attending the Board of Ed meetings every other week was kind of where my heart lied. I started to attend these meetings because to me, schools are the foundation of community work that needs to be done. It represents where we are as a community and where we're going as a community. We're training our workforce, we're training our future leaders, and whatever effort and investment that we put into the schools is what we are ultimately going to see in the community of Danbury. When a vacancy presented itself in January 2019, I stepped up to fill that vacancy because I believe in the power of public education, and I want that for every student that passes through our doors. So I ask for your support in November. Thank you very much.
I know it sounds a little trite because of the ninth person to speak in a row, but I do want to thank the members of the citywide PTO for doing this. My wife spent 3 years as the president of PTO at Park Avenue School. I know exactly how hard people who run PTO organizations work. And thank you very much for the effort tonight. My name is Joe DeSilva. I am running for the Board of Education. I'm honored to be on this stage with all of the people in the room. I'm a lifelong Danburian. I graduated from Danbury High School. I have bachelor's and master's degrees from Western Connecticut State University and a law degree from Quinnipiac College in Hamden. I love Connecticut. I love Danbury. My wife and I decided to settle here because I do love Danbury. We both do. My kids are 8 and 10 tomorrow. They're in 2nd and 5th grade, and that's why I decided I wanted to get involved. I love Danbury schools. I got a wonderful education in Danbury schools. We have great teachers and great staff and great administrators, but I think we can do better. I think we need to fight a little harder. I think we need to plan a little better. I think there's some things and challenges that we face. I think everybody agrees to that. And I think we can be a little bit more aggressive in how we deal with those and how we plan for those and how we deal for the future so that not only is the education great today, it's great tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Great introduction. Thank you. Now we move on to the first question for the mayoral candidates, Mayor Mark and Chris Otero. What has a lobbyist done, or what do you feel they should be doing for our school system? And is it also beneficial to continue to have one in Hartford? Mayor Mark, we're going to start with you.
Yes, I do believe it's beneficial for a couple of reasons. One, I just want to be clear that both the Board of Education and the City Council agreed to split the cost of the lobbyist between us. There are 10 cities in the state of Connecticut. All 10 cities have a lobbyist that works for them. And as a former past president of Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, I was elected by other mayors and selected across the state to represent their interests in Hartford. I know how much value a government affairs person can bring to the table. And so it's not a question of either or. There are those who have said, well, if you have a lobbyist, that means the mayor doesn't have to do anything. That's ridiculous. I'm in Hartford just as much as I'm in any other place, Washington included. But the fact of the matter is that you also need somebody that's going to work closely with your legislators to help them understand what the issues are of the moment in the city of Danbury, as well as for them to relay information back to you as it relates to committee work that might be going on. And so in 2016, actually it wasn't the first time we've hired a lobbyist, we hired one for the Head Start building way back in the 2000s, but in 2016, when we began planning for the Freshman Academy, we wanted to increase our reimbursement rate. And so Dr. Sell and I thought it was prudent to bring somebody on board, a team on board to help us do that. They worked closely with one of our representatives who really took the lead on this, and that was David Arcani, who said, I'm going to go out and fight for it. And he did, along with our government affairs person. And because of that, they saved the city $11 million in expenditures. And 2 years ago, when we needed a better reimbursement rate for our modular classrooms to be able to accommodate space, the same deal happened. Once again, those two went forward and fought for us and saved the city $180,000. So for the $30,000 investment, $15,000 on each side that we paid to have somebody up there representing our interests, along with the mayor, along with our council people, along with our state reps and state senator, it's a darn good investment.
Chris?
Thank you. We currently spend $100,000 for a lobbyist to represent the city and the Board of Education in Hartford. And one purpose is to lobby for increased funding for education. I heard the mayor at the city council budget meeting rail against Hartford, saying that we need increased funding. If I'm elected mayor, I'll be the chief lobbyist in Hartford for the interest of the city, and we can save $100,000. I'll lobby the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and make the case for why the most diverse city in the state of Connecticut requires more attention and more education funding. I'll work with our legislative delegation, Senator Julie Kushner, Representatives Godfrey and Arcani, Gugger, and Ali Brennan, to achieve the kind of outcomes we need to improve our schools, because I'll be the most effective spokesperson for the funding that we need. The issue comes back to outcomes. Danbury is the last 169 out of 169 municipalities in per pupil expenditure, and it's not because we have more students than anticipated. We have a $1.3 million funding emergency the second week of school and no idea how to close the gap. The superintendent of schools sent a letter to the Commissioner of Education asking for emergency funding, and the request was denied. Where was our lobbyist? What was he doing to help address the crisis? The time to have been talking about lobbying for more funding is when the report was released early in 2019 that projected 700 more students in the school system in the next 10 years. I think that we need more than a cheerleader, we need a champion. And that's the kind of mayor I'll be.
It's not debate. It really is debate. So we can address that.
So we're going to go ahead and move on. Next question is going to be for all the candidates. How do you propose the city addresses the needs of our ever-increasing enrollment? Let's begin this time with Mr. Sotero, then we'll move on to Mayor Boughton. Democratic after that, and going to lastly the Republican Board of Ed.
The hallmark of this administration has been inaction, and now we're seeing the results. Our schools are bursting at the seams after 18 years of uncontrolled, high-density residential growth. Did no one think that there would be children living in all of those condos? And we need a plan to manage the growth. We need a citywide commission made up of parents, teachers, administrators, and facilities experts to craft a strategic plan for our school infrastructure that takes into account increasing enrollment trends, not for 1 year, but for 20 years. Every few years, there's been a bond issue of $20 million or $50 million for additions to our schools. And I'm not saying that we need another school. What I'm saying is that we need a plan that makes best use of taxpayer dollars, and a strategic plan will help us do that. What was spent the past 10 years on school additions could have paid for another school if it's determined that that's what we needed. It's not just the outcome, it's the process that matters. We need an inclusive process to determine how we can fix these problems, and we need to empower our community to be invested in our schools. The Mayor's 2020 Task Force just met last week, and a request for members from the citywide PTO was put out after 350 students showed up on the first day of school unexpectedly. Crisis management is not the way to improve our schools. 2020 is around the corner. It's time for a change.
Thank you for the question. We have both a short-term plan and a long-term plan. Saying you need to get a plan is not a plan. Not a plan. What people are talking about, we're already doing. We're already meeting. We're already beginning that process. And yes, we did have a significant amount of unexpected students show up at the door. There's no question about that. We've seen a similar problem in the city of Norwalk. Same exact problem. 400 new students showed up there this year as well. So it leads one to believe maybe there's something larger going on here that we're just not aware of, that all of us in terms of the state have to take a look at in terms of why are these children showing up that aren't accounted for in anybody's demographic study. So I think it's important for us to know, if we're going to plan on how to handle this situation and manage it, where did the kids come from? Now, my opponents talked a lot about, well, it's from the west side, condos, that's what did it, that's what did it. And that could be farther from the truth. In fact, I spent today developing a heat map. This shows you where the kids are coming from, and I know it's hard for you to see it out there. But if you look on this map, you'll see on the left-hand side, your left, you'll see blue circles. They have Rivington listed on there. 75 students come out of Rivington. And then on the right-hand side of the map, on the east side of 84, you'll see red circles. And the West Street corridor, from roughly Amigos Deli up to City Hall, there are 512 students that come out of that one area. There are 6,000 students that come out on the right-hand side of this map, all basically in the urban core of our neighborhoods. Old line neighborhoods that have been converted to 3 and 4 family homes. There are 450 kids that come out of the west side, including all the neighbors there, as well as all of the new construction. Ladies and gentlemen, the problem that we have is that we have to manage a very difficult situation that many communities are facing today. And we're going to do that. We have a short-term plan to be able to handle those children for next year. But we've got to look beyond next year. We've got to look again to the next 5 to 10 years. And that's really what the 2020 Task Force is charged with doing. It's not just about next year. It's about developing a strategic plan for the time to go on beyond that, to be able to go into multiple years and understand what's happening. But first, we've got to address what's right in front of us. And so this is why we have spent our time pulling our information together to be able to develop that plan. When we do that, we'll execute it, just like we've done before. We'll go to the voters in March, we'll ask for an appropriation, we'll build the buildings, we'll hire the teachers. And let me just say, there's no funding emergency in the city of Danbury. We have already made arrangements with the superintendent last June for special ed funding, as well as this fall, once we knew all these new students were coming in September. We've already planned, we've been able to handle all this.
Hold the mic on.
Hold the mic.
Are you? Is that working?
No.
Try it.
That's better. To say there was no funding crisis is absurd. The superintendent wrote a letter to the State Department of Education indicating a 1.3 funding crisis. If there's no funding crisis, there's no reason for that letter. That's number one. Number two, a plan, a short-term plan and a long-term plan. Where's the plan? No one's seen it because it doesn't exist. The 2020 Task Force was formed in 2008. Hasn't met and only recently asked for new members last week. The time to come up with a plan is not after the horses have gotten out of the barn and you're trying to close the door. The time to come up with a plan is in advance. I support Mr. Sotero's proposal to come up with a commission, a plan, not just for now, but for 20 years. Because in 2008, you had that opportunity called in the 2020 Task Force. And once they decided we needed to do a bond in addition to Park Avenue and Shelter Rock schools, they stopped meeting, they stopped doing anything, because we've seen nothing since then, obviously. That wasn't, by the way, to be clear, that wasn't enough, because there's portable classrooms in the parking lot at Shelter Rock School, the school we just did in addition to, so obviously that plan fell a little short. We need a comprehensive plan, we need a long-term plan. We don't have one, we haven't had one. That's what we need. That's one of the major reasons why I'm running for the Board of Ed. Because our schools have been crowded, not just this year, but for years. This is not new. It was only made starker this spring, this fall, when 350 extra kids showed up at Danbury High School. That just drew it out into the public. It's not a new problem. This has been a problem for years. We haven't dealt with it. Now we have somebody who's willing to do that.
Thanks for the question. I just want to also add, as far as the enrollment is concerned, the district has grown by just over 2,000 students in the last 15 years. So this isn't an overnight problem. I think that, there were good intentions as far as addressing the growth of the city that maybe didn't meet what our needs were. And that's okay, but we do need to have a plan going forward. I think there are some interim steps we need to consider taking. One of those might be the Open Choice Program, which districts voluntarily enroll in, where Danbury's enrollment has been going up. A lot of the neighboring districts and across the state the enrollment numbers have been going down. So basically this program would allow some of our school children to attend school in neighboring districts if that was something that we chose to do as a group. That's a possible interim solution. Another interim solution, which the board has discussed and that I think came up also at the 2020 task force meeting, was finding a single location to house our pre-K program, because currently that's taking up classroom space in, I believe, 5 different schools. So that would open up some additional space in the short term. As far as the long term, the reconvening of the 2020 task force outlines some of the first steps that we need to take. That would be an updated enrollment projection from the company that provided our enrollment projections back in the spring. Those were a little bit off, and they're going back to figure out what exactly happened and to provide us with some new information to go forward. We're also, there's discussion about an updated evaluation of our space utilization to make sure that we're maximizing what we have and the way that we're arranging our classrooms. And then finally, putting together planning for where we're going to move forward, possibly with a new building, which frankly, I think we need. The challenges there are that we don't have any space on the existing structures that we own, and we don't have the money to purchase land. However, I do think that the city needs to really put some thought into purchasing land for the school or to donating land to the school. Back in August, there was consideration given to an $800,000 purchase of some blighted properties near the airport. That was something that the city council was seriously considering spending money on. I really think we need to bump our schools up the priority list. That seems much more important to me. Ultimately, I think that this is a team effort that has to come through coordinating with the Board of Ed and the city leadership to come up with some answers. Thank you.
How do we address the increase in enrollment? There's two issues: space and funding. The state and the city both need to allocate more resources to the school. The city needs to slow the continued development of apartments, condos, and townhouses, reevaluate the way it taxes rental property, discontinue subsidized property development. We need to continue fighting for more money at the state level, but the city needs to step up in the meantime. Space. We do not have enough space in our schools to fit our students. We cannot expect our teachers and students to perform if they are sharing classrooms or convening in hallways, closets, and stages. It's not fair and it's not safe. The city has limited us to expanding on existing school property. We have added modules everywhere that's possible. We added an addition to the high school. We converted an elementary school into a middle school, and they added modular classrooms. We have even explored building a middle school on King Street campus, which we all agree is a bad idea. It's time the city allocate property for the construction of a new alternative center for education, a new middle school, a new elementary school, and a comprehensive capital rehabilitation program for all elementary schools. Thank you.
So I'm just going to echo what all of my colleagues have said up to this point, because I feel the same way. I think the planning needs to be better. I think we need to get the community involved. That commission that Chris talked about is a tremendous idea. And these issues, these are not new issues. These have been right in front of us for years, and I can attest to this because they were issues when I was a student in the Danbury public school system. I know what it was like to try and cross through the C stairwell during the lunch wave or over the D bridge. It appears like every time we are building, we're building to capacity, not building to the future, and I think that's an issue. And, I've also seen firsthand the specials, like the arts, get demoted from a classroom to being put on a stage, to being put on a mobile cart. So I lived these issues, and they're not new issues, and I think our planning really needs to be better. We need to just start reinvesting in education, and I just think we need to plan this.
Thank you. I agree on a lot of the points that we have going on here. The growth is beyond all of our expectations. There was demographics that were put out, but this goes back a long way. I actually ran for the zoning commission 16 years ago to help curb the proliferation of condominiums in Danbury. I thought it was a problem then that having more and more condos would bring in more and more students that we couldn't afford to let that run away. That's not the problem anymore. The problem is the influx of students now is beyond the demographic plans that we had had for years. We've been looking at every single time the line's drawn up, it outweighs it, and this year was immense. We've taken every step that we could to address the issues as they come. We've sat down, as some of the other board members have brought up. We have begun looking into building new schools. It's finding how much excuse me, how much property we're going to need to build, how many schools, whether we can afford to do it, and of course to look at the plan for not a quick fix for right now, but for something that's going to lead us out for 15 or 20 years. To build a school that solves the problem for the next 3 years with getting 300 students a year in or more. Means that we need, if we were to just build schools to solve that problem, we need a school as big as Park Avenue every 2 years. We can't obviously do that, so we need a long-term plan. We've been discussing it with the city, with the mayor, with Dr. Pascarell, and we've looked at it through the architects, and we're trying to come up with a plan and a location, and do that coming up in the next term. So let's hope that we can get everything put together and get some more funding, as was addressed, from the state. That's hugely important. Thank you.
All right, so I'm chairperson of the Sites and Facilities Committee for the Board of Ed, so I'm very familiar with the enrollment. A couple of things. I'm not a person to throw numbers out, but we're going to throw some numbers out. So over the last couple of years, I've been on the board for 6 years, we've been growing 1.5 to 2% a year. This year, I believe it's 6%. So no one can have a plan to allow for that type of growth. But what I can tell you is that as a Sites and Facilities chairperson, we meet. We are in constant contact with the city. We're constantly doing studies to find new space utilization, land and sites to build. So to say there's not a plan, I take a little offense to that from my fellow board members, but there is a plan because we're living it every time we have a meeting. So the plan is to find space and develop space or add on and make sure that we get the resources into the buildings that need to get there. But to say that no one can allow for the increase that happened this year, it was an anomaly. And you could say where they're from, and people could say condos. I don't know any of that stuff. All I know is that we do have a plan, and it's fluid. It's constantly moving. I mean, enrollment changes, up until November. So it's a little different, with this many people coming in. So to say there's not a plan, I understand why they're saying it, but there is a plan, and we continue to work with the city constantly in studies, constantly. So, and like I said, I'm not going to get into any other numbers, but it's significant growth this year that no one can anticipate.
I kind of chuckled a little bit earlier when I heard the comment about horses. I have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, and I look at her, and I'm glad she looks like me and not a horse. So it's just a reminder that children are not horses, they're human beings, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And you want to talk about a comprehensive plan. You know, I drive around, I see the schools around Danbury, and the maintenance has been great with these schools in Danbury. We have new roofs, all the boilers have been replaced. To say that there's not a comprehensive plan is false. There has been a comprehensive plan. I also want to mention that you look at the numbers, okay? Just to give you a little bit of data here. Since 2012, 2013, we have 74.2% in graduation amongst the Hispanic Latino community. That's a 30% increase since 2012 and 2013. We have a graduation rate in the Black community that has increased by 9%, and 7% for students from a low-income household. That was done in the last few years. That was done with working with what we have. You can't just throw money and expect it to solve the problem. The state even told us. They told us to get creative about it. And when they told us to get creative about it, you know what I did? I thought about my time in the military. The time when we were short on resources. What do? We get creative. So I sat down with a couple of folks from the Danbury Prospect School. Here we have an organization, the Danbury Prospect School, that would not change the ECS funding. There's no state funding for capital expenditures or construction. They're willing to build that school, okay? And the property tax reallocation. That means property tax would be better spent without money being used right now as it is. There's a plan that I like to present to the mayor, to the city council. I hear all this talk about, I hear all this fight, I hear all this pushback from the city council. And I think we're losing track. I think we're losing sight of the fact that we have to work together. I take pride in working in state government under the new administration. I work with them. We have 3 executive orders that was passed that I drafted. I worked on a legislative task force, a bipartisan bill that got passed with military occupation skill. That's something that I'm gonna bring to City Hall. And I think the way we want to go is we really want to give Prospect schools a chance.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to go our next set of questions for all the candidates. What are your goals regarding education here in Danbury, and how do you plan on accomplishing them? Mayor Mark, we will start with you, and then go back to Chris.
Sure. You know, as somebody who had 14 years of experience teaching high school, I have a master's degree in educational psychology from Western Connecticut State University. I worked every day with Danbury students for most of my adult life before I became mayor. So I understand the challenges that they face, I understand the challenges of the district. But I think when we talk about goals, I like to see some key things be addressed and continue to be worked on. And we've been taking great steps on it. One is, I want us to continue to work on closing the achievement gap. The disparate difference between what certain economic households get in terms of test scores and access to services is important to us, but also it can lead to academic success if they have the right resources in front of them. One of the things that we propose and we brought to the legislature and we're working our way through the process now is being able to offer low-cost internet access to every single home and apartment in the city of Danbury. We're talking about $15 a month to start, and after 5 years it drops to $5 a month. Why are we doing this? Because we want every child to have access to be able to use the cloud, use the internet, to be able to do their work, to do their research, and not be locked out from the technological divide that exists. So I think that's a worthy goal and something that we're going to continue to work on. Obviously, we're going to solve our space issues and continue to build by being creative. We already spoke about maybe possibly using the open choice program. That's certainly something we should be investigating. We talked about potentially creating a single-stop pre-K center so that all of our pre-K operations can operate out of one building, and that will free up about 6 classrooms in our elementary building. That's a good idea. We ought to do that. We ought to talk about being able to utilize some of the schools around us that are being shut down by other communities because they don't have enough enrollment. Entering into a strategic partnership with those communities would be good and beneficial for our taxpayers. We ought to do that. And then we have to look at closing the funding gap that we see here. Everybody talks about the number 169.
30 seconds.
I'm going to give you a number. 83%. The taxpayers of the city pay 83% of the bill of funding the education for our children. The state of Connecticut has promised that it should only be 50%. If we were to get that 33%, that would mean about a $40 million increase to our school budget each and every year.
10 seconds.
I think that's worthy to fight for.
crisis in the school system. Our schools are bursting at the seams, and the report that was provided to the Board of Education in early 2019 states specifically that most of the growth is expected from children that are coming from the west side. We need a plan to manage the growth. We need a community-wide commission to craft a strategic plan, and we need adequate facilities for learning. We don't have that now. And we need a mayor that's going to be focused on getting that done. Danbury's last in per pupil expenditure. The mayor points to the city's blue ribbon schools as evidence that we're adequately funding education. Those awards were earned by the hard work of our teachers. What we do have here in Danbury are the best teachers in the world and children that deserve better. Municipal budgeting is a matter of priorities, and properly funding public education is one. We need a mayor that will lobby the state legislature for the resources that we need, and a mayor that delivers for our community. The $500,000 in impact fee that's to be paid by the developers of the Matrix is evidence of 18 years of missed opportunities. You know what else we need? We need to do better. That's why I'm advocating for universal pre-K. Studies show that children enrolled in pre-K succeed at a higher rate. How about we focus on what helps our students excel, not the reasons why not? And one last thing. Honorable mention goes to what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to have parents hold bake sales for 2 years to fund a playground for special needs students at a public school before stepping in at the very end to fund it. The city should have funded the Pembroke playground from the beginning. Like I said,
20 seconds.
we need a champion for public education, and that's the kind of mayor I'll be.
Thank you. Mr. Rowan.
No, I said earlier, one of the things that I really want to work on is having a teacher workforce that reflects our community. We've done so well with the police force and their emergency services, and looking at the numbers of 58% of the school system, students in the school system are from the minority community. I would love to see a teacher's workforce that reflects that, or as close as we can. This is not to say that we're going to do away with qualifications or high qualifications. It's still going to be there, but I really want to focus, want to work with the Board of Ed and focus on maybe getting more minority teachers from around the area who are obviously going to be really highly qualified to teach our kids. And choice, back to choice. It's number 2 for me, is I really want to focus on choice. But what is choice when we can't even allow Danbury Prospect to have a say of whether they're allowed to be open or not? I looked at Danbury Prospect schools, and I looked at over there at the schools up in the Bronx, New York, and they're having some very high success rate. So when it does come to choice, I want to make it very clear that parents do have a choice, and parents should have a choice of whether they want to stay with the Danbury public school systems or go with Danbury Prospect. It's not going to cost us a single dime. There's already state and federal funding set aside. All we need to do is get one brave legislator, and I'm willing to work with that legislator regardless of whatever they have in front of their name, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, I'm willing to work with you. But we really want to get into just one legislator, open up that funding. And parents, I'm telling you, you're going to have a real choice. And it's not going to cost you a dime.
Thank you. Mr. Pietrofacio.
Okay, so the goals, what are my goals for the, as a Board of Education? I mean, I think in general, it's to basically ensure that the kids in the district get the best education that they can get. And we do that by, one of the board goals as a whole is to keep teachers in front of students. And work with the administration to make sure that they get the tools and resources that they need to do that. I know it's a simple, simple goal, simple statement, but, as board members, we know firsthand, and I don't want people to think that, we understand the hardship that goes on and the challenges that the teachers and staff go through. I mean, we hear it all the time. And one of my big things is walking to schools and actually going and listening to the teachers and principals and building administrators. I mean, as a board member, we meet and we hear kind of a version of what goes on, and I have to see it to believe it. So that's who I am. So for over the years, I mean, I've walked with other board members pretty much every year, every school that I've been on the board. So that's where you really get the feel for what the schools need. I mean, it's good because I can't make decisions in the boardroom and meetings if I don't really see it for myself. So I think to continue to talk to the people who are actually boots on the ground and in the schools every day. We talk to teachers, and the teachers that are here and the people who know me, they know that, we're here for you guys as well. We're
10
here for
seconds.
kids. But I think it's really important for the staff to understand that we're here for you guys as well. And I think that gets lost in translation a lot. So we'll continue to work with the administration, continue to work with the staff, and continue to hear what they say.
Thank you. Mr. Johnston.
So I believe that we have to supply the administration with the tools they need to improve our educational process. And we've worked with the administration to set goals, goals that they can achieve, policies to allow them to work with the teachers, raise our achievement amongst all of our students. That's our primary goal. We need to give the school system its ability to teach the kids. We have great teachers in the school system. I've met with hundreds of teachers over the years. And the necessities are apparent. We need more space, we need more funding, we need bigger schools, which has all become a huge problem. And it's all going to be resolved over time, depending upon how much increase in students we have and how much our plan goes forward into building the right schools for our upcoming influx of students. The problem is not going away. I don't see any way that it is, and it does appear sometimes that it's triage, that we're trying to put in modulars, but the money just doesn't exist to build school after school after school. So we have solved the problems as they've come up. We're working forward on a long-term plan with the mayor and the city, and I think that over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to see a lot.
30 seconds.
Thank you. A lot of plans coming forward that the people of the city are going to have to look at and decide if that's what they want to help fund, and that we're going to, of course, need to have people up in Hartford. We have some of our representatives here that need to shake Hartford up and get us some of the money that we're supposed to get. We're shorted $30 million a year by the
10
state.
seconds.
So if we can get some of that money, we can improve our school system. Thank you.
So for me, a big goal of mine is to just make sure that every student that walks through the doors on their first day as a Danbury Public School student is walking across that stage in June, their senior year of high school, getting that diploma. And in order to do that, we need to invest in our students and we need to invest in our teachers. Like it was said a little bit earlier, we need to give them the tools that the teachers require in order to educate our kids to the fullest ability. We have the best teachers, I believe, in the world. And I'm not just saying that. I really think we have a special bunch, and the fact that so many continue to work as hard as they do. I mean, the fact that we have so many schools of distinction with the resources that they're receiving just speaks volumes to just the level of talent we have in this district. And could you just, dream with me for a second and imagine what they could do with a fully funded budget? And, I just think that there's so much potential, and if we give our teachers and, the administrators the tools that they require, every year that school board budget that comes forward is not a budget that'll give us some play money in the end to kind of do some things above and beyond. That's a budget that keeps us at line with growth. And I just think that we need to invest more and make sure that every kid is getting that diploma, because, it was special. It was a special feeling, handing that diploma to a student, and some of the
30 seconds.
It was worth it, and I think at the end of the day, that's the goal, is to get the kids that diploma and make their time in Danbury a good one.
Ms. Cooper.
My goal is, if I'm elected to the board, I join the Board of Education to ensure an equitable education for all students. Since then, Danbury demographics have changed. My goals have not. I want to ensure that the district does what's right for all students, regardless of their race, gender, or socioeconomic situation. And if I am elected, I will continue to ensure that the district does what is right for, again, all students. I will continue to advocate for more resources, the equitable allocation of those resources, and the proper administration for our district.
My main goal is to achieve proper funding for education in Danbury. There have certainly been comments around the idea that money can't fix everything, and that is true. It can't guarantee graduation rates, it can't improve literacy goals. But when our schools are insufficiently funded, it guarantees that our students are being underserved, that our teachers are being overworked, and that we're in a precarious position where if things don't go as expected, there's a crisis like we experienced at the beginning of this year. So we need to work with City Council to address the decline in budget appropriations for the schools. In 2009 to 2010 school year, the schools were funded by 55.3% of the total city budget, and the next year the funding dropped to 54.4% of the budget, and that pattern continued to our lowest point, which was in 2014, when the schools were funded by 50.2% of the budget, and those numbers add up. If you were to assume flat funding of 55% of the budget, which is how it had previously been, there's a shortfall of approximately $65 million, which could and should have been spent on education. We also need to press the state to fund our schools appropriately. While other cities and towns are losing students, Danbury's experienced significant enrollment increases and a widening group of students in special education and English language programs. But funding from the state has been relatively static. And even more problematic is that some of this funding, which comes through the Alliance grant, we receive because we are one of the 33 lowest performing districts in the state.
30 seconds.
So we are caught in this cycle where if our performance increases, we risk loss of funding. Ultimately, we need to work as a coalition alongside our state legislative delegation and our city leadership to push Hartford for more equitable funding.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that everybody up here on this dais is concerned with increasing the educational attainment of all Danbury schools and the quality of the school education in our schools. How we get there is the question. First, I think we need to support our staff and our teachers. And that doesn't just mean what their contract is. What it also means is making sure there's enough reading tutors and social workers in our school and English language learning teachers, people who can help people learn English language. Those are the things that are lacking when our funding is down. Now, I don't want to beat everybody up with a bunch of statistics and math, but I'm going to anyway. For example, in comparison to Norwalk and Stanford, not good, folks. According to the Connecticut School Finance Project, Danbury gets almost twice as much money per pupil as Stanford and Norwalk, and we spend $5,000 less per student than Stanford and Norwalk. For example, Norwalk got $1,949 per pupil and spends $14,426. Danbury gets $3,275 and spends $89.30. We spend less than all of our peer towns in the state of Connecticut. For example, we spend less than Bristol, Groton, Middletown, Norwalk, Stanford, and Hamden. That's not Greenwich, that's not New Canaan, that's not Darien, that's not Cornwall. We are shortchanging our students. If we want to increase our educational attainment and the benefits of the education of the city of Danbury, we as a city need to step up to the plate. And it is not the fault of the state of Connecticut. Could they give us more? Yes. Did they give us more? Yes. This year, Danbury got over $5 million more in the biennium budget that was originally proposed by the governor. This goes back to the city of Danbury. We need to step up to the plate.
Thank you all very much. Those were the questions that Citywide PTO has asked our members here. They were given those questions in advance. Now, we passed out index cards with golf pencils. And I hope a lot of you wrote questions, and they were filtered out, a lot of them same questions. And I have the questions here. And I'm going to read them off. Hopefully the penmanship is good. For the mayors, just the two mayors. Danbury has a 30.8% Latin population. Danbury is home to many mixed status families. Your stance on national immigration policies and your refusal to not work with ICE agents could negatively affect students from mixed status families. What will you do to make sure these students feel safe at school and in Danbury? Let's start with Chris.
Yeah, what I said at the debate last week was that I would not deputize the police department to go in an unmarked van to pick up day laborers to then have the city be a defendant in a civil rights suit where the city ended up having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money to settle that litigation. And so, you know, I believe that we should respect diversity. And so, you know, when it comes to targeting any particular group or any particular background, I don't think that that's appropriate under any metric. And so, you know, if someone's involved in some kind of activity, criminal activity, that's what we have the police department for, no matter their background. And so, you know, I think that we ought to respect diversity, and I certainly believe that that's a fundamental value here. And that's the kind of mayor that I would want to be. Have an administration that's inclusive in how we make policy and respectful of people, because I think that that's important. We're one city and we're one community. Thank you.
Let me just say that when you stand up in front of this community and you put your hand out, raise your right hand, take the oath of office, you agree to enforce the laws of the state of Connecticut, United States of America, and of course our local ordinances. You don't get to choose which one you like or don't like. That's just part of being a leader. So back during that time that Chris is referencing, our officers who were working on an ICE operation did engage in that activity. As that turns out, post that activity, those individuals, many of those individuals were deported for criminal conduct. So even the people in the immigrant community wouldn't want those individuals leaving there. And then later on, when we entered into a partnership with ICE called 287G, where 2 detectives were trained to enforce the law of the United States of America and got special access to a database, we were able to find people in Danbury who were wanted in other countries for horrendous crimes. We had one individual who was picked up in Danbury who was wanted for being a serial murderer in Eastern Europe. He is gone because he don't belong in our community. And it's not fun, but sometimes you have to do those kinds of things. That's what a leader does. Now, in terms of looking at, well, what happens now? The state of Connecticut has passed something called the Trust Act. The Trust Act is very specific about how our police officers can interact with ICE on a day-to-day basis. And we follow the law with the Trust Act as well. That's why I raise my right hand and take the oath of office, to follow all of the laws of the state of Connecticut and to ensure that our departments do as well. So I think that families can feel comfortable also because of the Supreme Court decision called Plyler versus Doe. And in that we're not allowed, our Board of Ed and the intake folks at Osmer Street are not allowed to ask whether somebody's here legally or illegally. And I don't know if I want to live in a city that does do that. You show up with a backpack, a pencil, 30-second ruler, and you want an education, we have a moral obligation to give you an education, to put you on the path to success. And I'm proud and honored to be able to do that. And by the way, I did that as a teacher. I taught English as a second language for 5 years. I worked with kids from all over the world. Made them, I think, better people, although it depends if you ask them. But the point is, those kids left Danbury High School speaking English, and I was darn proud of them.
Thank you. Okay, this next question is for all the candidates. We're going to start with Mayor Mark first after this. Okay, I am a senior at Danbury High School. I have a dream to minimize Danbury High School's carbon footprint. Many schools have already participated in this type of project. Over 16 plus schools to be exact. This type of project could save thousands of dollars annually. Money would go into the budget to support salaries and the bare necessities in the school. Is that the one I finished?
All right, okay. Actually, it's a very good question. I applaud our Danbury High School senior for asking that. We strive every day to have a clean and green approach to things that we do, particularly in our schools. In Danbury High School, we've switched to a dual fuel heating system. It's a little technical, but basically you could switch over to natural gas, and we do that frequently as the price of natural gas has dropped, and it's actually cleaner burning material than number 2 heating oil. In addition to that, we will install solar panels on many of our buildings. In addition to that, we've also converted all of our school buses to propane so that they're not spewing out all those diesel particulates that get in the air and that you have to smell as they drive by. So we've taken some really good steps in terms of sustainability, but we can do more. It's a silly thing in the sense of the grand scheme of things, but it's important for us that we've converted our waste treatment plant to be able to produce our own diesel fuel. That'll allow us to be able to produce a fuel that's cleaner and, of course, costs nothing and is made from a byproduct that we collect in our waste treatment system. We're also working on a comprehensive plan for all of our buildings. One of the things we've done, and I've talked to Dr. Sell about this, is that the city does its thing when it comes to solar panels, for example. The board does its thing. All of them are well-intentioned, are good, and have saved us money. But if we work together on a comprehensive approach for all of our school buildings and all of our municipally owned buildings and land, we can do things like solar farms and other things like that to be able to generate our own electricity. That's all really good stuff. And of course, the number 1 candidate for that is the Danbury landfill, that wonderful mound of grass that we see out there on Newtown Road. We've been doing several analysis about putting solar panels on there. We think it can work. They don't have to be anchored. They're anchored with basically just a light anchoring system, so you don't have to pierce the membrane that's underneath there. And again, it's just another way that we can generate electricity and put it back in the grid and to be more clean and more green. So I think that's a great question, and I applaud our senior for asking.
Mr. Rowe.
Yeah, I think the mayor covered everything I wanted to say. So I just take just really short moments, just because I took exception to the last question about diversity and the mayor's enforcement of immigration laws. I want to tell a really quick story that when I was in high school, I had them for study hall, and back in the '90s, we had a lot of population gays. And while many teachers were ignoring us, there was one teacher that stood out. Yeah, he was a little quirky. Some might say a little corny, but you know what? He paid attention to the minority students. He paid attention to the Asian students. And that teacher was Mayor Mark Bauer. So when the opportunity came for me to work with him, I jumped on it and I took it. And I'm proud to be working with this mayor who's very diverse, who's very inclusive, and I do take exception to people who suggest otherwise.
Mr. Pietrofessa.
Like Reason said, I think the mayor covered pretty much everything, but I'd like to invite that senior student to come down to one of our board meetings. We have a public participation. Love to hear some ideas, because we could always be, like the mayor said, always be doing more. And get us some information. Like I said, we're open to hear any ideas. When you come to public participation, don't worry, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting.
Thanks, Bob.
Johnston.
Yes, thank you. I'm totally on board with that. I actually personally own my own solar panels on my house. I have a fully electric car out in the parking lot right here that I drive. I am the chief electrician on the hydroelectric dams. I'm all about green. I think it's a great idea. I've been for putting solar panels if we can do it, and if we can get rebates. And like Mr. Petrofisa said, any of the students who want to come down and discuss it, I'm always thrilled to be involved in that aspect of taking it, and not just to do something because it's green, but because it's also viable, because you can do some of this stuff. We can get rebates from the state, from the federal government, and we can offset some of those costs and return that money back to our school system. And I think it solves a lot of problems, and it has a great look forward. I've walked the walk myself. I've been looking and doing it for years as an electrician, and I think it's a great goal that the student brought up. So I would be more than enthused to talk to any student that wants to come down, speak there, or talk afterwards, or see if we can put some sort of committee together to look further into it. So thank you so much.
Mr. Brandt.
So ditto to everything that was said so far about the green energy, but I think it's a great idea. I think it is the future, and I think there's also the educational aspect of it that could be pretty cool about getting it in the classrooms, the engineering of the green program and stuff like that. And free energy is free energy. I mean, we'll take anything free at this point, but yeah, I support it. And please, any students that are in the audience right now, I think my brother is still here, but come annoy us at the Board of Ed meetings yell at us, come stand in the public speaking line, tell us how crowded the hallways are, and any good ideas, any ideas you guys have, come communicate it to us, because it's your school and it's your education, and we work for you guys, so please, any ideas, just like this green energy subject, please come talk to us, communicate with us, email us, harass us, whatever, just come speak to us.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper.
I would just echo everything that has been said. I would invite our young people, students, to come down and have a sit down with the chair and board members, and we discuss it. I'm the type of person, I'm old school. I'm not gonna jump on it just because you say it's green, let's go green. We have to look beyond just saying, what can we do to make this right for the school system by Corona Green? We have to also think beyond 4 or 5 years, what would be the aftermath. And I go back to when we put in a turf up at Danbury High School. We have to just don't say it's going to be right because it sounds good. But on top of that, I invite you to come down, sit down with us, so we can go over the pros and cons of looking at this. And we will sit down with you at any time. Thank you.
Ms. Canetta.
So yeah, obviously I think that's the wave of the future, is to look at the way that we use our resources and figure out the best way to preserve them and to make sure that we're protecting our environment from the harm we've been doing to it for quite some time. One of the things that came up at a Board of Education meeting several times was the possibility of switching over from styrofoam lunch trays to regular hard plastic lunch trays like they used to have. And because our budget is so tight and has no wiggle room in it, it was not feasible for us to even entertain the idea of doing this. So when we talk about the budget issues and how they impact our school days and the lives of our school children, this is something that I think everybody would normally get on board with, because if you consider the amount of waste that comes out of our 17 schools every day from lunch and how that piles up over the course of the school year, we'd all like to do away with that. But we simply don't have the funding to make it happen at this point. So I would encourage all of you to show up at the meetings and let us know what's going on at the schools and to fight for the changes that you want to see happen. Thank you.
Reducing the carbon footprint of any school is obviously a great idea. It's a credit to the student to come up with the answer, and to Danbury High School for educating students that have that sense of civic responsibility. But mostly what I think it does is it proves that whether it's a 16-year-old at the UN or a high school senior here at the Danbury Board of Ed PTO forum, it's the young that will save us from a climate catastrophe, climate crisis in the future. Thank you for the question. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a tremendous question to minimize the carbon footprint of our school system to find savings. I think it's a matter of commitment to the process and to the premise, because it's a matter of technology. I was a member of our city council when the landfill closed and the membrane was put over the landfill, and so even back then there were discussions about how to harness the landfill itself to find different ways to produce energy of one type or another. And so I think it's just having a commitment to the technology that's constantly evolving so that we can in fact find those kinds of savings and that we can improve the carbon footprint. So I mean that's a great question. I'm glad to hear that there's even an application with regard to the school buses, because one of the threats obviously to the environment is emissions. And so the more traffic and congestion that we have in the city, the more likely it is that we're going to have a bigger threat from the emissions. And so I think that it's a good idea that the vehicles also take advantage of that technology, because the traffic situation in Danbury can be difficult. So I think that this is a terrific question, and certainly credit to the student that asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is going to be, With our current DPS focus on equity in our schools, what funding would keep such a project sustainable? Mr. Estero, we're going to start with you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. With current DPS focus on equity in our schools, what funding would keep such a project sustainable?
I mean, you know, I've got to, I can't hear you.
No, that's okay. All right, listen, you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. With the current Danbury public school system, focus on equity in our schools, what funding would you keep such a sustainable project?
I mean, when you, equity in terms of, equity in our school system, I think, is important in terms of how we treat our students and how we treat the school system as a whole. I mean, what we want to do is we want to give every student the opportunity to succeed, and we certainly want a school system where everyone has a quality of education. That's certainly a fundamental right in the state of Connecticut, and so I think that it's important that we have that we bring that kind of approach to the school system, and that we put forward policies that are going to not only prepare our students but also promote outcomes that are superior for all students in the Danbury Public Schools.
Okay. I think that in any way that we can support equitable outcomes for all of our district is a good thing. If you're talking in terms of how individuals treat one another, and assuming that each child in every school in the district has access to a quality education, then I think that it's important that we make sure that our resources are balanced appropriately. I think Dr. Sal and the board do a good job at that, making sure that children have access to the specific needs that they may have in terms of their education. I'll also say that there's also another word that's used out there a lot. It's called adequacy. And it's a little bit different than equity, because equity simply refers to keeping all things equal. But really the question you ought to be asking ourselves, are we doing everything that is adequate for our children and for our parents? And that is a much broader discussion that we ought to have in our school district. It's why I was a prime mover and shaker and one of the first mayors to pull together a group of mayors to sue the state of Connecticut over the issue of adequacy and funding of our schools. And that court case took 11 years, and we won in the trial court. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court threw it back to the legislature and said, you guys got to figure out how to properly fund your schools. But the issue was over adequacy. Equity is important, obviously, but it's also the question that we need to ask ourselves as we move forward, as we begin this process to bring more money into the district from the state, to get them to honor their commitment, to do their job, that we are giving each child an adequate education, or at least an adequate opportunity for an education.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Mr. DeSilva.
Thank you. Equity is equal as everybody gets the same thing. Equity gets more a matter of what they need. So if I stand and look over a fence, you don't give the person next to me no box to stand on if they're 5'5". You give them a box so they can get to the same level that I'm looking over the fence at. That's equity. Equity is about a matter of fairness. Equity is about giving people the resources they need. That's a function in our system of, for example, making sure we have social workers, making sure we have teachers for kids who are English language learners, making sure we have the right resources for all of our children to have the opportunity to excel, the opportunity to learn. Without those resources, we deny them the opportunity. That's a function of all of our funding. That's a function. Now, don't get me wrong. Could we get more money out of the state of Connecticut? Of course. I'd love to get more money out of the state of Connecticut. If I'm on the Board of Education, rest assured I will be screaming at the top of my lungs for more money from the state of Connecticut. That said, that's not the only source of funding, and that's not really where we're falling down right now. As I said before, the city of Danbury trails every peer community in the state of Connecticut in education funding. We're not doing our job. Connecticut School Finance Project estimates an average. We spend $4,000 less per student than the state average. I hate to break the news to you. That's not a badge of honor. I'm not proud of that. I don't think that's good. I don't think being dead last in education funding is good. I don't think it's a badge of honor. I don't think it's something we should wave from the rooftops. And I don't think it leads to equity or equitable outcomes or equitable offer or access to our kids. That's what we have to do. We have to work on our funding. It won't happen overnight. We're not going to solve the problem next year. It's a problem that took a long time to get here. It's a problem that will take time to solve. But if we don't recognize it's a problem, we'll never solve it.
So the equity policy that the Board of Ed and the administration's been working on is this idea that we're going to create an environment that gives every student the opportunities that they need to be successful in our district. There are a couple things that we've talked about specifically. One is the recruitment of more teachers who look like our student body. That means that we need to work a lot harder to recruit and retain bilingual teachers, and Latino and Hispanic teachers, and African American teachers. That's something that I think we could, discuss figuring out how to recruit and retain those teachers. Some districts will offer an incentive for them to come. Another area that we need to think about with our equity policy is the materials that we provide for our special education and our English language learners. The playground is a great example of that over at Pembroke. If you think about the education of children, recess and playtime is not the thing that pops first to your mind, but that's an important part of the school day for lots of kids. Imagine being the kind of kid who has to sit and watch from the window or sit on the side in your chair hanging out while everybody else gets to go play. So that's the kind of thing where we spent some significant amount of money to bring that opportunity for our kids, but it was necessary, and it was important to the equity that we were trying to create. Another circumstance I can speak to is that I had a conversation with a couple of kids who go to school at Danbury High, and they're in an ELL class, and they have no Chromebooks. The Chromebooks were given out to kids in the regular English classes, and their classroom just didn't get them. And I can't think of a population that would be better supported than the English language learners through the use of that technology to make it equitable for them. So those are just a couple areas I wanted to mention.
Equitable. I think that we have talked about this at several board meetings, and I think that we all believe that in order to move our students forward, they all must have the same tools. And how we go about doing that is when our administration brings things to us that we can put forth and move forward to make sure that things are in the classroom, the teachers have what they need to help make the students move forward. So I truly believe that as a group that we can work together in discussing what we need to help make this board a great board, our students great students, but we have to do it together. So every student needs the tools that they need to help move them forward, 100%. It doesn't matter where you come from as to whether we decide what you need. And sometimes we need some of our students to step up and say, well, I'm not happy with this, and someone else can look into it for that student. But students are students, and sometimes they don't like to, bump something. They just want to leave it and be silent about it. But I think these are things that the board, the superintendent, and his staff can sit down and talk about how do we make this happen to move things forward to make sure that all students in our schools get what they need to move forward.
So as far as the equity and the funding and everything, I think this just goes back to what was already mentioned a little bit, is getting our students and especially getting our teachers the tools they need, because equity is equal, right? So naturally you're going to have some students that come in already excelling a little bit more than their classmate, but if we can get every student to be learning on a level playing field, that's equity. And in order to do that, you need to get those aides in the classrooms. You need those tutors, you need those, for the English language learner students. You need more teachers, you need more aides, you need more support, more tools in that toolbox for our teachers. And in order to do that, we need more money. We pay for this, and it comes back to the funding, and it comes back to investing in our students and investing in our schools. And I think we need to start thinking about that. Get all of our students to that level playing field, and getting our teachers the tools that they need to educate our students fully.
Thank you. Yes, we have a whole policy set up. Kevin Walton's been working on that, and the board as a whole is moving forward in putting that policy together. The funding for that will be done in the way that every other item is funded. There is no way that we're going to isolate out equity in our move forward. So as far as specific dollar amounts, the administration, we fund it. We set up the policies, and the administration will fund that policy as it needs to be funded to make sure that all of our students get what they need to move forward. It's as simple as that. We're not leaving people behind because we can't afford to serve their needs. Everybody gets treated equally, and we're actually putting that into an overall policy and moving forward with it. It's been in process, and it's doing great right now. So we're looking forward to have that done in probably before the end of this year. So thank you.
I agree with all my fellow board members. That's something that we've been working on. I think Mr. Walson, he's in the back, he took charge on that. And one of the things we've done is, and I mentioned earlier, was we engaged the feedback of the people, staff in the buildings. And I go back to that because it's very important, because they know what's going on firsthand. So we've done that, and just to echo what the rest of the board said, we're constantly working on that. And I'm going to say funding because everybody else said funding.
I think there were some key phrases that was said earlier that really rang with me, and equity, adequacy, and opportunity. I think all of those goes hand in hand. So I look at this from a different spectrum because I'm fairly new to this. I'm not too familiar with equity policy, but I look at this from the perspective of a parent. And having someone who's going to enter the school system very, very soon, because she's 3 years old, and next thing you know, she's going to be 16, 17, 18. When we talk about equity, I also want to look at choices. I want to look at choices, because choices are going to present opportunities for parents. So I'm going to give parents those choices to decide what other options we have for our kids to go to school. And you guys spoke, I said earlier, some of the options that are out there it's not going to cost you anything. So we want to talk about equity. I also want to mention opportunity. And we got to leave those options open. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Now, we have 3 questions left. The next 2 questions are for Mayor Mark and Chris, and then the rest of the Board of Ed candidates. So this one, we're going to start with Mr. Sotero. Only Mr. Sotero. Please elaborate on your plan to provide pre-K in Danbury. How will this be funded?
Yeah, I've indicated that I think that pre-K is important, and that it would give our students a real leg up. The studies show that for every dollar spent in pre-K, that we get $5 back. And so in the end, it's a significant investment that gives our students a real leg up because they perform better through school if they have that opportunity for pre-K. Pre-K would be funded through the state of Connecticut, and so when I talk about being a mayor that's going to go lobby the legislature, we're collaboratively with our delegation, with Julie Kushner and the state representatives, Bob Godfrey, Arcani, Representative Arcani, Ken Gucker, and Rizabelli Brennan. That's what I'm talking about, right? So that we can have a legislative agenda to try to move our city forward and our educational opportunities in the city of Danbury. And one of those, I believe, ought to be universal pre-K. And so it would be funded through the state of Connecticut. And I've said before that I would be the chief lobbyist for the city of Danbury. And this is one of the things that I'm talking about, that I would lobby the governor, the Senate President, and the Speaker of the House, and the Chairman of the Education Committee, in order to make the argument about why our city is the most diverse city in the state of Connecticut, and why the needs that we have are important. And I think that it's, our city is one of a kind. And so I would bring our resources, our issues to the attention of the state officials to make the arguments until they stick, right? About what it is that we need and what we're pursuing here in the city of Danbury regarding educational policy. And so when it comes to pre-K, that's exactly what I would do. And I would lobby so that we would have that funded and we can provide that opportunity to the children of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Now, this next question is for Mayor Mark Bowden. Candidates say that they value the diversity of this community. How will you, or do you, demonstrate this value?
Well, I think first of all, I do that every day. I'm proud that Danbury is the 11th most diverse city in the United States of America. I wear that as a badge of honor. I think it's a great place to be. I started my adult career working at Danbury High School, where 50 different languages are spoken every day, and we're back in I can't believe how long ago that was, but 1988 when I started working there. So in terms of when we look at our city, diversity has been something both historical, but also has been something that we have always celebrated and will continue to celebrate. Under my administration, we've implemented an entire program related around diversity. We created a Heritage Plaza outside of City Hall where we host groups each weekend. This past weekend we had Italian Americans that were there to celebrate raise the flag of Italy for Columbus Day. We have St. Patrick's Day there. We have Ecuadorian Independence Day there. We have pretty much Portuguese Independence. You pick the day, pick the ethnic group, we have a celebration that's there for them. Because we want to send a message to every Danbury resident that each of you has played a part in building us to the community that we are. There's an old saying that says, well, we all drink from the well, we never forget who dug the well. Well, it's immigrants that dug the well of this city, and I certainly understand that and believe that that's our future as well. So the fact of the matter is that whether I'm attending a mosque or a temple, I was in a mosque on Friday, by the way, a temple or a church or a synagogue, or whether I'm at a birthday party or somebody's 16th birthday party or a wedding or whatever the case might be, we're there to celebrate with the community. I've been with this community for 18 years as mayor. I don't shy away from that. I'm proud of it. And I've hit every single event I possibly can to show this community that I respect you and I respect what you do. And I want you to feel like you're part of this great city that we live in.
Thank you. Now, thank you. The last question is for Board of Ed candidates only. What experience has best prepared you for a Board of Ed position? I'll repeat that. What experience has best prepared you for a Board of Ed position?
Thank you. I'll go first. I have a couple. One being the military. Younger, growing up, I wanted to be a cowboy, but that was unacceptable, so I joined the Army. And being in the Army, I was surrounded by such a diverse group. But I was comfortable in the Army because at Danbury High, we had that diverse group, even back in the early 90s. So I was comfortable in the military. I've met folks from all walks of life in the military. My 10 years in the military and going to the Balkans, fighting Afghanistan, I've met people from all walks of life. So you name the characters, I've met them and I've known them. The other, working in state government. Now, I mentioned earlier that I worked under the Malloy administration in the Labor Department, and I was proud and I was happy to get things done with Governor Malloy and his staff. I mentioned earlier, we got 3 executive orders that I drafted, all passed. The legislative task force that I worked on, bipartisan legislative task force, we passed that as bipartisan support. I helped draft the law, and we got passed. So my experience is working with diverse,
30 seconds.
Being in a diverse culture, in a diverse community, and working in state government shows you that I can work with both sides of the aisle. There's a time to campaign, and there's a time for propaganda and rhetoric. But once that's done, you work. You get down to work. And what I'd love to see our state legislators sometimes, work a little more, get more engaged. Work with, it doesn't matter what year or it doesn't matter.
10 seconds.
Once the campaign season is done, get to working. And I have that experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Professor.
Well, there's nothing like on-the-job training for the last 6 years with this Board of Education. One thing I can say is this is a very, diverse and unique district. So I'm going to leave it at that. But on-the-job training, being a chairperson of the Board of Ed, and working just, with different administration, different board members. We've had some changes over the last 6 years of different board members, and everybody brings a unique perspective. So, like I say, there's nothing like on-the-job training, and I hope to continue on. If I don't, good luck to whoever gets on there who's new.
Mr. Johnston.
Thank you. I have to reiterate that. I've been on the, I've dedicated a lot of my adult life to serving the community in Danbury. I've been on several boards, the last 4 of which were on Board of Ed. And it was a very eye-opening experience when I got there. It takes a bit to get into the swing of it. There's a lot to do, and it's a very demanding job. The hardest job I never got paid for. But in the long run, I was elected twice to the chair, and it was an honor that I took with it. And if I'm reelected, I hope to carry the experience that I've had for the last 4 years forward. It's a great group. It's a great school system from top to bottom, and I hope to be there to help out in the future. Thanks.
Mr. Brady.
So the experience I have, I think, is the most unique experience out of everybody up here is that I have been a student in Danbury for every year of the current administration. So I was there from the start all the way to right now. And I think that really prepared me. I'm in touch. I know what it's like to walk down a hallway and be shoulder to shoulder with everybody the entire way to your next period class. So most of the teachers I had are mostly still there. So I still have those relationships with the teachers in the buildings that are still teaching. So I'm in touch with the district. I know the issues that are going on right now. And that's an experience that I think is valuable, and that's an experience that I bring to the board, and I hope to continue to bring to the board if I'm elected next month. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper.
After serving on this board for 28 years, and before I was elected in 1991, I came to Danbury, and I got involved in my church and my community. And as I started going and listening to various things that were going on in the community, I decided that I was going to start attending board meetings. I attended board meetings for 2 solid years before, some of you might know her, Mrs. Nancy Marcus came up to me and says, "Why don't you run for the board? You're here at every meeting." And I did. That's how I got started. And I've been serving ever since. And out of those 28 years, I think I've missed maybe 5 meetings. And that has nothing to do with all the subcommittee meetings that we have. So I'm dedicated. I believe in doing what's right.
30 seconds.
All children should have the opportunity to learn and do what they would like to do. And so I hope that I get elected again, but if not, I'll stay home and enjoy my 2 beautiful grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Camilla.
Gladys, you took my answer. In a similar vein, I actually attended the Board of Ed meetings for about 2 years before I stepped up to fill a spot. And that experience was really unique in that you, being on the other side of the table, being in the audience, you really are very attuned to the public speakers that come in. You get to have conversations in the downtime with parents and with teachers and with students who attend the meetings and perhaps don't stay for the full experience of the meeting. But that gives you the kind of insight, I think, that really drives why you do this kind of work. You know, we're all up here, each of us have given quite a lot of time to the schools in one way or another. And that's because we all believe that each of these kids deserves a quality education. I benefited from
30 seconds.
a really excellent public education, and I want to see that continue for the next generation. I think that's a really important way that we preserve the community here in Danbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silva.
Thank you. I think that I have lots of involvement with the community. There's lots of things that I could tout as what I think makes me qualified. What I'll determine that is the opinion of the voters on November 5th. Why I'm running, I've always been involved in the city. I've volunteered as much as I could for as many years as I could. I started in the zoning board of appeals under Mayor Eriquez. I'm a proud member of Worcester Hose Volunteer Fire Company. I work for a very small business. I don't own it, but I help. I'm an attorney there. I'm one of the only 6 attorneys. I understand how budgets work. I'm a homeowner. I understand how taxes work. I'm respectful of all of those. I understand money doesn't grow on trees and we have to prioritize. Mostly, one of the things that got me to run, I spent the last several years with my kids in school trying to desperately help them with their homework. You want to be in awe of what teachers do. Try and help a 3rd grader with their math homework. We spent the last 4 springs coaching my son's t-ball team. You want to be in awe of what teachers do every day. Try and teach a 6-year-old how to throw a baseball instead of a right foot. I am in awe of what our teachers do. I'm running because I want to support them. I want to support all of our kids. And that's it. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, since we have so much time left, I think we're going to do 1-minute closing for each candidate. I think that's fair. And then I have my closings, and then we can go home. The Yankees already lost, just to let you know. I'm really upset. All right, closing, Mr. Sotero. 1 minute.
I want to first thank the citywide PTO for sponsoring this and for all of you for coming out to hear us tonight. I think it's important that we exchange ideas, and this was a great opportunity. You know, I've talked about the fact that I'm an attorney and that for a living what I do is to advocate and to mediate and to negotiate, and how important that is, not only in my own practice, but it's important, I think, as an elected official. You know, what I think the mayor ought to be doing is to use those skills every day on behalf of the people of the city of Danbury. And so I've said that throughout this campaign, that I think that it's important that we look at outcomes, that we set a standard of effectiveness, and that's important. That's important to the people of the city of Danbury. And that's the kind of mayor I want to be, someone who's focused on good outcomes and doing what's best for the people of the city, using the skills that I have, and that's what I want to do when I'm elected to the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bowden.
Thank you very much to Citywide PTO. We appreciate the time that you spent here, and of course to our moderators, you guys are great, so congratulations. It's not easy doing what you do. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, and I'll say it again, I have been proud to be your mayor for 18 years. I've seen tremendous growth in this city. I've worked closely with the board, with Dr. Sal, and with the entire team to make sure that we deliver a quality educational experience to our students. But it's more than just that. I've been proud to be here for 18 straight balanced budgets. I've been proud to be here for 18 years of strong economic growth, the strongest this community's ever seen. I've been proud to be here for being a leader of one of the safest cities for 18 years in the state of Connecticut. I've been proud to be as mayor of a city for 18 years that has the lowest unemployment in the state of Connecticut. I've been proud to have the highest bond rating in the city's history for 18 years in the state of Connecticut.
10 seconds.
And I have been proud to work with one of the most diverse group of people you can ever find in the United States of America for 18 years. That's what we do together. That's results. And that's why I'm asking you for 2 more years to continue the great work that we've done. God bless you, and thank you.
Thank you. Is that working? Okay. I thought I kind of just closed a second ago, but very briefly, my political idol has always been my dad. My dad spent 17 years in the Danbury City Council. And if there's one thing he taught me, is that the rule for any elected official in any office should be to put the city first, your party second, yourself last. If I'm elected, the kids come first, the city comes first, the party comes after that, and I come last. That's what a public servant does. They put the people they're elected to serve first. That's my commitment.
Thank you. Ms. Camilla.
I just want to say thank you again for organizing this. I appreciate the opportunity. I personally feel that the schools are at a crossroads here. We are experiencing, obviously, some problems with enrollment and some funding issues. I would like to have the opportunity to continue the work that I started by stepping up in January for another 4-year term. And whether or not I'm elected, I intend to be at those meetings, and I intend to continue participating in this process. I think it's really important that we do everything we can to support our school kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper.
Finally, I would like to say thank you again for putting this program together for tonight, so we can have this great discussion. And again, if I am elected, again, I will do my best to serve everyone that went to the vote and voted for me. I'm about doing what's right for everyone, and I believe our kids and our students are a part of that. Danbury is a beautiful place to live. We have wonderful people. We have a diverse community, and I just love it. I didn't like it when I got on the bus in 1970 when I came here, but Danbury grew on me. So I'm here to stay. It grew on me. It wasn't the most friendliest place.
10 seconds.
But I'm here to do what's right and serve those people that believe that I'm in a position to help. So please, thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. Britton.
So the Danbury Public School District is an amazing school district, and it did a lot for me. Did a lot for my family, did a lot for my friends, people I know, and the reason why I'm running for the board is I want to give back. And I want to be a good Board of Ed member. I think our kids deserve it, our teachers deserve it, and if I'm elected next month, I promise you that I'm going to give everything I can give and put the kids first, and put our teachers first, put the district first, and just make sure we get those kids onto a level playing field and get this district moving forward, because our children are the future, and I want to make sure that we are educating them to their fullest potential. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnston.
Thank you so much for putting us on. You guys did a great job, as always. I would appreciate the opportunity to move forward. I've enjoyed my time on the board. It's a difficult job. It's a great job, and it's rewarding despite the difficulties. And I have 2 kids in the school system, and I wouldn't want them anywhere else despite the issues that we have. And I'd ask that you guys vote for me, give me a chance to finish up what we already started. We are moving in the right direction, overcoming a lot of problems, and the school system that I have nothing but admiration for the administration, the teachers, all the staff that puts all this together
10 seconds.
on the shoestring that we run it on. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Professor.
And I'm not going to guarantee we're going to get more funding, if I'm reelected or something. I can guarantee one thing. People that have known me, party politics aside, I've always done what's best for the board and best for the school district and best for the kids. So I stand by that. Party politics aside, sometimes, it's difficult when we're making decisions, but at the end of the day, I always can guarantee that I will do what's best for the school district, and vote for Ralph.
Thank you. Mr. Rowan.
What a beautiful country that we live in for someone like me who was not born here, born during the killing fields, to come here and not speak a lick of English. Started in Moore Street School. By 3rd grade, I knew all the bad words. That's the neither here nor there. But to go through the Danbury public school system, to be a product of the Danbury public school system, to have someone such as Mayor Mark as one of my study hall teachers. And I'm not going to lie to you. You're not going to come first. my daughter's gonna come first, my family's gonna come first. But you know what? You're gonna benefit from that. You're gonna benefit from that because she's gonna enter the Danbury school system. And my love and my dedication and motivation for her is gonna extend to all your children's. So that's what I'm gonna promise you. And I'm gonna bring some new ideas. You might not like it, but if you vote for me, I promise you I'm gonna present other options besides the cookie cutter one that we've been hearing all night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Citywide PTO is honored to have hosted this event. Before we conclude the evening, we wanted to extend a sincere thank you to all the candidates for taking their time out of their busy schedules with us tonight. Next, a thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. We are hopeful the information that was provided was very helpful with regard to issues on hand for Danbury Public Schools. The Citywide PTO also strongly advocate that all district parents attend their local PTOs. There is so much information that these groups can share with you and keep up to date with about the happenings within the school system. On a final note, a reminder that Election Day is 3 weeks on November 5th. Please get out and vote. Have a great evening.